Morning, everybody. I'm super excited to welcome Erick Simpson. Erick, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sugata. I really appreciate you inviting me. I look forward to today's conversation.
You have an amazing background, and Peter and I were talking to you right before this recording. So I would love to have you introduce yourself to the audience and what you've been up to.
Thanks. Sure. So my background is in the enterprise. I got tired of the internal politics, as many of us do, and decided I should go out and start my own IT practice. I did that in 1997. Around 2005, decided to try flat rate IT services where we were bundling services together and trying to get our clients to say yes to them, which of course today we know as managed services. So we made all the mistakes, Sugata, the first year trying to figure this out, but we did figure it out and became very successful very, very quickly to the point where we sold that practice in 2007. So I can claim that I was one of the first MSPs that actually built and sold a practice in the channel. And then we launched MSP University, which is where over the next 10 years or so, we trained about 30,000 IT providers to become best-in-class MSPs. And this was through live boot camps we would do all over the world. I mean, it was like this amazing event experience where I'm going to claim that we were the first to have a conference where nobody could pitch or sell anything. Like we had sponsors come in, but we had to educate our attendees on operations, marketing, sales, service delivery, leadership, HR, and it was all immense training, 2 or 3 day boot camps. It was a lot of work, but we really enjoyed it. Today, I still work with tons of MSPs at MSP Mastered. We do coaching and consulting and a lot of M&A work, Sugata, with those partners today. And then at Channel Mastered, our other organization, we work with vendors and distributors, helping them develop and improve their channel programs, bringing them to market, and then connecting them with our huge MSP partner channel.
That's pretty amazing. So this is almost your 20th year then.
You're aging me. Thanks. Appreciate it.
That's pretty amazing. So let's dial back a little bit. So talk to us a little bit about how 2005, how did it look like? You know, the industry was talking about you got to get out of break fixes. You know, there are a lot of events started to happen, but subscription economy was not there. Like, I mean, there are some, what we used to call application service provider, which are SaaS today, right? Salesforce, kind of an upstart in San Francisco at that time. Mm-hmm. So subscription was kind of a new thing. And so tell us a little bit about what that, scenario looked like and who are the audiences? How did you go to market at that time?
Yeah, so in 2005, if we go back that far, it was a completely different environment than what we have today. I mean, today, an MSP or an MSSP for that matter can start their organization and connect with vendors and strategic distribution partners that really have matured to the level that they want to help that MSP grow their business. And they have MSP friendly programs that allow the MSPs to get onboarded quickly, to leverage their marketing and sales assets and go to market relatively quickly. And the subscription pricing models that MSPs enjoy, because that's how they're billing their clients, it's all very much aligned today when it wasn't that way back in 2005. I mean, back in those days, Sugata, I had to buy 1,000 licenses of an RMM tool and then hope we could sell them quickly enough to get to an ROI, because we were then, again, remember, we were trying to flat rate IT this stuff. So these programs and the relationships with the vendors and the distributors was very transactional then. It was more about volume and things like that. Today, we have such a thriving and vibrant MSP community made up of leaders in the vendor space, in the distribution space, in the marketplace space, and with the MSPs. It's a very unique community, nothing that I've ever experienced outside of the MSP community, where everyone kind of pitches in. The rising tide lifts all boats kind of mentality. We share. I've not found a lot of, weird, like, you're a competitor, I'm not going to share with you. I mean, I'm sure there's some of that going on, but I think the majority of us, because we're delivering services and solutions to clients because we want to genuinely help our clients, we want to help everybody else as well. So I think those are some of the key differences. Yeah. So we were, it was a lot different what we were selling then. And of course, we didn't have the big cybersecurity challenges that we have today. So things were relatively simple. Our whole thrust was to try to find additional products and services that we could sell on a subscription basis to our clients back then, Sugata, where we might not even be delivering the service at the end of it. So we were creating relationships with, attorneys and accountants and introducing those relationships to our clients, broadband cabling and things like that, where we focused really specifically on the things that we were good at. And we just surrounded ourselves with great strategic partners, and we would do revenue shares and refer business back and forth between each other. So those were early days, kind of trying to build the tools that we have today.
Yeah, and then pretty much, I mean, the only thing that were on subscription model were antivirus, anti-spam, and certain licensing that you could get, maybe certain domains, but most hardware not on a subscription model. There were no bundles. The PSA tools possibly were just coming to market, right? Autotask and ConnectWise and etc. So talk to us a little bit about, if you pick like a SMB mid-market, kind of those two segments, right? Because MSPs thrived. Of course, now there are MSPs in enterprise. But if you think about that sort of time horizon, what did a solution bundle look like, a typical an SMB and a mid-market play? Like, what would it have in it on a monthly service basis?
Back in the day?
Yeah.
Well, there was very little mid-market because we were perceived as being threats to internal IT departments, right? Back in those days, if you'll recall, I mean, you've been around as long as I have, we were struggling to sell services as a co-managed IT, where today we have more and more MSPs and MSPs succeeding in winning that business. I think primarily because of COVID, because when COVID hit, mid-market and enterprise basically could not shift their business model quick enough to support these work from home or work from anywhere users. So now the MSPs were a great option, right, to come in and help do the co-manage. So I think we benefited as a channel because of COVID in that way. It's like, oh, we now can get beyond that. Oh, you're a threat to us. Well, no, you're actually an asset to us, and we need your help. And I think that allowed us to really accelerate. Back, when I had my MSP before we sold it, we were really, really struggling those first few years, because remember, this was something that we thought we had just made up to try to get more mileage out of our existing technicians and engineers on a kind of a flat fee subscription basis. But it was hard to get the SMB clients that we were used to working with that were really concerned more about cost and expense, because in those days, we were primarily a break, fix, and professional services shop. So we were great at all the Microsoft technologies. We're a Microsoft Gold certified partner. We were a Citrix partner, and we did those types of solutions. But to get those existing clients to say, oh, sure, Eric, come, I'll pay you in advance more money than what I'm paying you now, because I'm very conscious about what it costs me. They were probably the wrong clients. And we learned how to evolve beyond that to get to the more strategic clients. So our typical bundles, when we first came out of the gate, once we did a correction after about the first 12 months where we figured out we were undercharging, was we were delivering unlimited remote support, help desk services. We were charging initially for on-site visits. And there was we learned from that, because clients' objections were, well, you're just going to figure out ways to charge me to come on site and fix stuff, which was the opposite of what we were doing. So we eventually included on-sites as well once we matured. Then we were doing remote monitoring, patching, and updating, so the RMM stuff. And then finally, the one service that that was kind of the essential component that broke through and allowed us to really sell the way we wanted to sell to clients, was vendor management. We figured out that we were taking all these tickets from clients who were dealing with third-party vendors, and they couldn't get the issue solved. And they would ask us, hey, can you please solve this for us? And we would fix it with the vendor, because we knew exactly the right questions to ask and get it done. But we weren't monetizing that. So that became vendor management. And I will, again, take credit for helping, if not creating it, but helping accelerate that to what everybody does today, is to say, hey, we will manage those vendor. You just open a ticket with us and we will take care of it. And of course, we build for that, right? So now we had the three legs of the stool. We had end user support, remote monitoring, patching and updating, and we had vendor management. And those were the day-to-day or month-to-month subscription services that we sold, in addition to infrastructure upgrades and, Exchange implementations. And we were doing a lot of Microsoft SBS small business server. That was the heyday of small business server. We sold hundreds of those servers back then.
So when you think about, as a solution bundle, if I take those three things that you just said, so that's on the product side. And then
Mhm.
when you think about the product market fit, when things take off, what do you think happened in the market? Is it because most of the SMB owners were bringing in their consumer experience? Because at home, whether it's Netflix or Prime or things started to get in, everything is just subscription, right? And then cybersecurity happened. There were more attacks than they could ever imagine. Ransomware was in the news. Then listening to you, like, looks like what the COVID was a major driver. So what were the pivot points in your mind that pushed the industry, not so much just from the solution provider, but also from the buyer perspective, to go to this model without questioning it?
Well, it took a while, right? It didn't happen overnight, but we got to a critical tipping point where we started to see end customers, business owners getting to their second or third MSP. Like when you look at like when it first comes to market, we as IT business owners, as MSPs, a lot of us, Sugata, are very, very good at the technology, but where we need help is in sales and marketing and maybe, operational finance, HR, those types of things. Like we need to surround ourselves with that, or we need to mature our organizations to that point to really develop our unique value proposition and to get past taking on every customer, right? Because we want that revenue. We started becoming a lot more mature in terms of identifying who our A and our B clients were and who those C customers are that are really those businesses that don't really fit that strategic consultative subscription based business model that MSPs like to deliver, right? These C customers are the ones that are always, arguing about the invoice and slow paying you and aren't growing. So you can't really add more strategic value. So I think one of the drivers, in addition to what I just described in that scenario, is MSPs started becoming a lot more strategic about the way that they handle their sales processes and their client relationships. So moving from a selling technology or selling technology outcomes to selling business outcomes, right? So this is now where we see a lot of VCIO engagements or VCTO engagements where we're sitting down with clients and really kind of helping deliver those business outcomes, helping them fulfill their business vision. Like when we start asking clients, what's your 3-year plan for the company? What's your 5-year plan for the company? What's your growth strategy? How are you going to get there? And how can we leverage technology to empower you to achieve that, right? And to move a lot of your costs to, as a service, right? So you have some financial and tax benefits when you're doing these things. So just becoming a little bit more mature about who we are, the client, the target audience that we want to serve that provides us the highest margin, and then delivering those additional services that distinguish us from our competition. Not just cybersecurity anymore, Sugata, right? It's all about compliance is the next kind of wave that we're approaching. AI is on the horizon, right? So when we talk about having two types of clients, regulated clients and unregulated clients, because I did that for years. I said, well, you have two types of clients, regulated and unregulated. You need to have a bundle of cybersecurity services for each. But in a couple of years, every one of our clients is going to be regulated in one way or another. And the reason I can say that with confidence is we absolutely have to comply with their cyber insurance policies requirements. So we have to have a minimum bundle of services that includes the traditional managed IT services, along with a good cybersecurity portfolio to match their compliance needs or requirements. And we should bundle those in a good, better, best kind of a scenario. And the good bundle of services should be what we require every single one of our clients to subscribe to, just to be our client. And then we can move on from there.
So let's talk about kind of, you talked about COVID was a major driver. What happened, do you think, at that period of time? Why did the market shift into more in
So
this direction?
yeah, I think that what happened there was candidly the mid-market and enterprise organizations were really good at having their internal IT departments serve the users that were coming into the office every single day, and they had standardized processes and infrastructure and things like that. And they weren't really supporting this hybrid work or remote workforce. If they were, it was, kind of outliers. You may have a couple of folks that did something special for you that supported that. But as soon as the lockdown came And, we had to distance ourselves and nobody could come into common areas, let alone workplaces. Those mid-market and enterprise organizations needed to find a solution quickly. And that opened the door for MSPs that had been challenged in trying to sell into the mid-market and enterprise space as even a co-managed IT or a very specialized solution provider. Now it opened the door for them to, have those conversations and say, oh, you need to get back into operating mode. We can help, right? We can create these secure VPN connections. We can deploy secure cybersecurity measures to those remote workforces. We can deliver remote support in tandem with your existing IT teams. And I really think, Sugata, that was kind of the pivot point of these organizations saying we need a solution, and we should engage with these external MSPs to help us with this, because otherwise, we're going to have to shut down. It would take us too long to build that capability internally to support these users.
And I guess what you also said, the industry almost had little more than a decade of experience in providing bundled services and these tools. I did a podcast with Sal Ferlaza from Ninja One, and they saw phenomenal growth. Of course, they're still seeing it as an RMM provider, and they pretty much, Sal said, he grew the entire business on the back of MSP partnership. I mean, that was critical. But let me ask you one thing: if you have to kind of look back, because I'm going to use that as a theme going kind of forward, talking about this AI adoption. If you go back from a market adoption wise, if you had to pick 1, 2, 3 in an order, do you think it was provider readiness, or was it more RMM tool readiness? Was it more PSA as an enabler? What was the number one thing you think brought these other forces together?
In terms of penetrating the mid-market and enterprise market?
That's correct.
I think I wouldn't pick. I think it was a perfect storm of having all of these things is the perfect storm, right? All of these things were ready at that time that came together in a very unique situation and scenario. And not to mention, you said it, the provider's readiness. Like, we were on the bench, like, put me in, coach. We're ready to go. We can jump in. And I gotta say, MSPs saved the day for these mid and enterprise organizations. They saved the day for their SMB customers. I mean, we can't, appreciate them enough for going the extra mile. I know partners that I work with, Sugata, that, actually did work for free to help their SMB customers. Now, anybody that, looks at EBITDA and profitability would probably say, well, that's kind of crazy, but they knew that would come back to them, or they reduced their prices to help their clients get through this. It was this huge upswell of, we're all in this together and we will come together to get through it together. I think it was very, very special and unique. And my hat's off to, to the MSPs and to the vendors. The vendors came in and did the same thing. They helped out. They gave MSPs and their clients special pricing and consideration and flooring accounts and extended terms. I mean, it was pretty amazing to see. You remember?
That's quite amazing. So let's talk a little bit about you and your organization, evolution of it. So if you think about before COVID and after COVID and where you're now, can you kind of walk us through that journey? Because you yourself had an amazing journey through that.
Yeah. I mean, and through COVID, I was, we deliver services, as I mentioned before, to MSPs and to vendors. And I think what I saw was MSPs really, there were a couple of, based on maturity level, right? The MSPs that were pretty mature were able to take advantage of that opportunity on their own and really, really grow. I speak to many MSPs that were like, oh man, we had record years. And then I work with some MSPs that were struggling through that needed to upskill a little bit to adjust their value proposition and their sales and marketing approach to penetrate that. So we work with them through that. So my MSP focus was very, very healthy, but where we really were successful was on the vendor side with Channel Mastered. So the MSP Mastered is our organization for MSPs, and Channel Mastered is the organization for vendors. And remember when the same thing happened with conferences and live events, like the entire industry kind of we couldn't do any of that anymore. The events where vendors could connect directly with MSPs, prospects, and existing partners and clients and appreciate them all that was gone too. So everyone had to shift to virtual events. And so we definitely delivered on webinars and half-day virtual events and digital marketing and, all of this thought leadership where we really excel on the channel mastered side. The vendors came to us and said, "Hey, can you help us continue to, reach MSPs and promote our value proposition and connect with them and all that?" And so everyone, I think, Sugata, had to adjust their business model to either take advantage of the opportunity here or to support their existing client base to get through this together. And so that's how it affected our organizations.
So let's talk a little bit about the partners, right? Who actually made it happen, make it happen every day from a managed services perspective. If you have to pick maybe three profiles, right? The ones that are doing really well, the ones that kind of in the middle of the road but could do better, and the ones that are really struggling. What are the attributes that, create that separation from
Mm.
best performer to sort of kind of there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the best in class MSPs have a strong understanding of their true cost of service delivery for every one of their lines of revenue and are optimizing their sales and marketing approach to focus on those. They are mapping budgets to growth targets, and they're kind of very mature in understanding what the value of their organization needs to be in terms of looking forward towards an exit, right? So there's EBITDA that happens, and then there's efficiencies, and then shifting more and more of their workloads to recurring revenue services, managed services being the top one. It's got, a much higher multiple of value for every dollar that you receive. It's probably $1.70 or higher in multiple for managed services, whereas a break fixed labor is 15 cents on the dollar as a multiple when you're doing valuation. Now, again, we consider all these different things. So I think the best in class MSPs really understand the drivers for profitability and efficiency. They understand their true cost of service delivery per hour of labor, and they're considering all of their costs when they are quoting their services. And by that, I mean that there are some MSPs, maybe in the middle or the lower, segments of what you just described, where they see some of their overhead costs or their tool costs or their platform costs as a cost of doing business, and they're basically writing that off, right? So these best performing MSPs are incorporating those costs into their pricing for their clients. It could be a percentage uplift on every agreement to cover the cost of their platforms, documentation platforms, and other things. And they are certainly making sure that they understand the cost of all of their third-party services or solutions that are adding to their service bundles and making sure that they're hitting a target margin for that. And in addition to that, they are really, really good at scoping and risk management and change management when they're delivering projects, right? Because that's another area where you can be tremendously successful or lose your shirt if you've scoped, the quote for the project is very, very healthy from a profit margin, but by the end of the project, you've eroded that margin, then you're not managing something correctly during that deployment, right? It's typically change management, setting proper expectations, having phase review and things like that. So I think the best in class MSPs are focused on profitability as the number one driver, and they understand everything that it takes to do that. And they are tiering their service desk accordingly. So they're not having a ticket being touched by multiple technicians on the way. They're only delivering tickets to the right queue or resource so they can get that first call resolution or first touch resolution more often than not. The folks in the middle, I think, they have a sense for where they want to go. And I think what they're missing is what I tend to see is maybe too many direct reports. So they haven't evolved to the point where they are assigning some middle management layer to manage some of the key critical business units. And they probably are still trying to deliver sales and marketing internally by some of the technical folks or maybe the leadership. So I think it's just an accountability chart activity where you say, what does it take to build a thriving IT organization or any business? We need folks, at the top. We need some management layers. We need some leaders in each of these business units leading service delivery, leading sales, leading marketing, and then having a strong perspective on what it takes to be profitable, and having a discipline around culling their C, D, and F customers on a regular basis. Like every year, I want to look at my most underperforming clients, and they don't even, maybe they're consuming our services and all that, but maybe they're not growing, right? At some point of maturity, you can manage folks that are profitable, but if they're not growing, they may be taking the spot for another A or B client that is growing. So these are tough conversations that MSP leaders have to have with themselves and move forward. And I think at the smaller MSPs, they're really trying to figure out what their solution stack needs to be. They're refining their target audience's needs and bundling and providing those services solutions that those folks need, and probably are looking at having trouble with hiring the best technicians and engineers, because maybe they need to work on their understanding of true profit and cost of service delivery and truing up every one of their clients to their current rate. So for instance, if they go out and sell a new client tomorrow, Sugata, the new client's rate is X. If it's, a 50 user organization, how many of their legacy clients are paying that same rate? So I think there's a huge opportunity for those folks to get in there and true everybody up. And then that gives them the ability to have more profit, to grow, to bring more technicians in that are billable, and making sure that we're allowing those technicians to do what only they can do, deliver billable service. So I see a lot of wasted time with some of these technicians where we're asking them to, participate in too many meetings, or there's a lot of drive time or on-site time. If we're targeting an 80% utilization rate for our technicians, we should be doing everything we possibly can to allow them to achieve that and get out of the way, if that makes sense.
That's quite amazing. About a decade ago, this whole space we're in software as a service, right? We provide an application to enterprises. There was some understanding of what a good SaaS business looks like. But over the last 10 years, when you look at it, it has evolved immensely, and there's like 12 metrics. If you're hitting, whether it's NRR or GRR or customer acquisition or LTV, etc.,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you're hitting those as a SaaS, you're in top class. So there's a complete template how to be a great SaaS company. And if you're a founder, whether one or two or 50-person company, you got to keep an eye on the metrics, right? So kind of listening to you, it is amazing to hear, back in the days, like 2005, I can imagine if you had 50% billable, you were doing really great. And now I'm hearing from you is 80% utilization rate. That's a fascinating metric. So can you tell us maybe 5, 7 top 10 metrics that if I'm starting out today, or if I'm in kind of the low to middle class, what should I really focus on?
Yeah. Well, this is a conversation I have a lot with clients. So, I'll share maybe 5, right? So number 1 is resolution time to resolution, right? For every ticket. So I'll talk a few about service delivery, and I'll talk some operation ones, some finance ones, and maybe some marketing ones, maybe some sales ones. Let's see how far we get. So time to resolution, you want to make sure that you are solving those tickets as quickly as possible. Number 2, first contact resolution rate. So the percentage of time that it takes, the percentage of tickets that you solve without having to pause or escalate out. So the higher the better on that one. CSAT, super important. Like, what is your customer satisfaction rate? The higher, the better. Technician utilization, I said, 80% is what we want. And sometimes that's tough to have, but when you are creating the appropriate work types and the technicians are booking their time appropriately, you don't want to penalize them, Sugata, for things that they have no control over. Like if you're asking them to, sit in 4 hours of meetings a week and they miss their 80% utilization rate because of that, they shouldn't be penalized for that, right? So they should be able to pick those work types that don't work against that utilization rate for success. I think from a project management perspective, how many projects are on track or off track? How many projects are within your internal budget or outside of your internal budget that you budgeted for that project? And are you managing risk and change management appropriately? And then what's your pipeline for projects, right? One last one that I'll share on technicians' profitability, right? We want to make sure that we want to have 2.5 times multiple on top of what our technicians' cost is. So let's say that our technicians' burden rate is $50 an hour to us. We want to make sure that we're billing them at least 2.5 times that for every hour of labor that they put in. Anything kind of below that almost kind of gets into break even with all your other overhead and management tasks and things like that. So there's just a few.
That's quite amazing. I mean, these metrics were not there. Even when I think about 10 or 12 years ago, there were a lot of speculation. And what is surprising is there's a huge overlap with SaaS metrics. Your first 4 or 5 metrics are customer sat metrics. And when we look at, our base, those are the fundamental input drivers.
Yep.
Eventually, you want to measure value in terms of EBITDA, but unless you're controlling these inputs, EBITDA is not going to be there.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and I have, these weren't kind of well known in the MSP community for a long time. But before, remember I said I was in the enterprise before I got tired of the internal politics and all that? I built out call centers and service desks for Fortune 1000 organizations when I was in the enterprise. And so we had all these metrics, and there's different metrics for service desk versus call center. So if all call centers have a couple of extra metrics, right? First call close, response time, call wait time, and all that kind of stuff. So these metrics were what I carried forward when we started building our MSP practice, if you will.
So let's talk a little bit about the 2 tracks that you have. One is for the brands, another one is for the partner provider. From an education perspective, walk us through what those 2 journey look like.
Yeah, so MSP Mastered is the organization, like I said, that focuses on helping MSP. So I have a subscription platform there that contains curriculum, training, coursework, quizzes for MSPs and MSSPs, sales professionals, pretty much every person that an MSP would employ. There's an LMS there that they can subscribe to and download all of the assets, forms, tools, calculators, agreements. I mean, I've written and created probably the largest archive of MSP business transformation assets over the last 20 years. And that's all available at MSP Mastered. And we also do coaching, we do consulting, and we do M&A consulting for MSPs there. Then on the Channel Mastered side, this is where we help vendors with their go-to-market strategy, with their channel program strategy. We do content creation, we do channel analysis, we do competitive analysis, we do partner lead generation and partner introductions, focus groups, surveys, pretty much a wide bench of services that a vendor organization would need at the different levels of their business growth.
What portion do you think in the last mile today, right? There are various types of providers. You have system integrators, you have, still there's some resellers in there. Of course, most of the resellers have become e-tailers, large providers. Like if you look at the composition of the last mile, do you have a sense what percent of that is managed services today?
Wow, that's a loaded question, Sugata. I think, thinking about the metrics or the statistics that we get from, big analyst organizations, in North America, we probably find a range of about, what they identify as MSPs, about 45,000. I think worldwide it might be 65, 70,000, maybe 75,000 at the outside. So comparing that to, the rest of the ecosystem, it still seems like a pretty small percentage overall, don't you think?
Yeah, number-wise maybe small, but from a value perspective, as a service repetitive, subscription-wise, it's possibly a very large number. Jay McBain has, a bunch of numbers on it. So when we publish the podcast, let's see if we can put some slides in there. We'll put those numbers in there. But let's talk a little bit about where we are and where we are going. And history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So if you kind of look back, these 3 forces that you talked about kind of came together: provider readiness, tool readiness, and partner readiness. And then there's a huge sucking sound for demand because we went remote. When you think forward, like next 3 years, sort of from an AI adoption wise, we're seeing kind of 2 buckets. There's a lot of consumer point product tools that we're all using at an individual level. But then when at enterprise level, Salesforce announced yesterday, if you look at some of the announcements, there's a lot of money going into infrastructure, but actual application adoption, Battery Ventures published a number in Q4 that out of all the POCs that happened, only 5.8% in enterprise went into production and even partial production. And I was meeting with a large client, Fortune 100 companies, global VP of IT. They're taking 6 countries out of 151 countries they operate, just going to do some POCs. So it's nothing, right, compared to the amount of hoopla that we're hearing about.
Yeah.
So when you think about that as an enabler, if you have to look at your crystal ball with the experience that you had, what are the forces you think need to come together for AI adoption to really happen?
Yeah, I mean, and you think, well, is it a bubble? What is it, right? And I think from my perspective, I'll take the MSP channel perspective or the MSP's perspective. I think we're still trying to figure out how to what the potential is and how to monetize it. I think it's really early days for MSPs, and I know a few MSPs that are taking it and running with it. What I think will end up happening, Sugata, that will kind of fuel this momentum forward is as more and more of our strategic vendor partners and disties and marketplaces begin integrating AI into their platforms. I mean, we know that ConnectWise and Kaseya are integrating AI at a very rapid clip, as well as other point product and solution vendors. I think that we have to get to a tipping point where everyone is comfortable, right? Because there are a lot of concerns around privacy, around security with AI. Where's the data live? Where does it go? Who owns it? I think there are a lot of things that need to be solved for mass adoption. And then really, I'm not sure that we have that killer app other than some of the things that we use on, like, I use ChatGPT on a daily basis, multiple times a day. Copilot is in the wings. So there are, some apps that are coming along and they're improving, but there's still a lot of uncertainty about, what the best way to govern AI is. And who knows what's going to happen with some decisions made by the new administration here in the US, right? It's kind of like, shifting sands, right? So there's a little uncertainty, but I think the more that we see AI being integrated into the day-to-day tools that enterprise and MSPs are using, I think the more open folks will be to expand on that and maybe be more creative about building some revenue generating services on top of just deploying these applications for customers and end users.
I guess we all forget, but about 20 years ago in 2005, the market leader in mobile was BlackBerry. And at that time, the only way you could get enterprise is through corporate IT, right? But then later part of that decade, we heard this whole term called BYOD, bring your own device.
Yep.
And it was really the consumer that as it switched over to iPhones, they rebelled against IT, and IT started to allow you to bring your iPhones into your workplace, right? So do you think that one of the adoption driver is going to be like bring your own AI, because we're all going to use at an individual level and IT is going to push back, and then eventually they're just going to cave in because it's already there on all of our devices?
That's a great question, Sugata. And I was that engineer that said no to clients. We are not supporting those phones. We're not bringing that into the enterprise. We're not exposing it, and had to cave in because of that demand. I think it's different. I think it's a different conversation with different risks, allowing people to just bring their own AI. I mean, again, as an engineer, by trade, and my essence is I'm like a firewall. I'm going to say no to everything until I get time to evaluate it and make sure that it's safe to include and support. So I'm not sure that we'll see that happen as rapidly as some people might think, because again, people bring their own devices into work. We as solution providers have to deploy a specific profile and make sure that they are allowed in because they're running the proper cybersecurity, services on those and things like that. And when people bring in their mobile device, we can create kind of the business profile that keeps the personal profile separately. If people are bringing in their own AI, that'll be a different kind of a puzzle to solve. Like, how do we make sure that, we approve it and the data is managed and governed properly? Because, business data and corporate espionage, is a big threat.
So let's talk about next 12 to 15 months, short horizon, right? Because what's possibly out there is going to possibly very likely get adopted to some extent. So you're one of these players in the market that have both macro and micro pulses. So if you look at from provider perspective, the technology that you just said, multiple providers integrating, what are the 2 or 3 obvious things that you think we're going to see through the MSP toolkit that you think are going to get integrated?
Oh, I mean, we're seeing it now already. I think, the bots that basically help solve tickets without human interaction, right? Password resets, things like that. And I think agentic AI, I think, I'm seeing that now. And I think that's the big potential opportunity here for MSPs in the short term is when a client can call in and not realize or have a chat conversation with AI and not realize it's not a real person, right? It's kind of like the Turing test, right? I think that's going to be a game changer for MSPs because there is a class of service tickets that can be managed by AI, but we don't want to just throw clients to an AI because we want them to feel that personal relationship and connection. I think we're going to see improvements in leaps and bounds in agentic AI, agent-based AIs to help clients, to help MSPs really become more effective and efficient and profitable in delivering service. And then the escalation process for that ticket now to actually need to go to a live technician because it wasn't able to be solved easily, and routing and dispatch, AI based smart dispatching, all of those features and functions, I'm looking forward to seeing them roll out. And the MSPs that are the early adopters that really have a hand in tweaking and tuning and providing feedback to the vendors that are developing these tools and services will be we'll get that first mover advantage, I think.
All right, so let's come to the last question because in the end, MSP, it's not about technology, it's about people. So, there's been a lot of fear, but there has been also a lot of optimism that AI is going to take jobs away or is going to create jobs in another category. So, what are your thoughts in that regard in the 12 to 24 months horizon? Do you see these agents taking jobs away and then the MSP providers' numbers are shrinking, or you think they're going to grow?
Yeah, I do think that there is a threat to a certain level of role being replaced by AI. We can't deny that repetitive, low skilled roles and activities can be handled by AI much more cost effectively. I think the challenge for MSPs, Sugata, becomes how do I upskill my staff to allow for this to occur, right? How do I get my staff that AI could do that job and upskill them so they are more valuable to my organization and to my clients' organizations? And I think that solves another challenge that MSPs have today. If we look at it from that perspective, is the cost of hiring new technicians, right? It's kind of it's a math problem where we think about, how many tickets can a technician close? And when do I hire my next technician? Oh my goodness, it cost me 3 times what it cost me 10 years ago to bring a technician in, or I'm churning out a technician and all of that institutional knowledge goes away. Now I have to pay 3 times more for a new technician plus the ramp time, right? So I think it helps to address, some of the pain points for MSPs, but we need to be vigilant about it. And at the same time, we're running a business for profit. So there has to be a balanced way for MSPs to look at this and really evaluate the potential and not miss the human factor, like you just mentioned. Like it's all about people. We want to take care of our team, we want to take care of our clients, and we want to make sure that we're delivering the right solution with the right portfolio of services and the right supporting platforms and technologies that help us grow, become more profitable, serve more clients, and then reward our existing staff commensurately. Because that's the piece that sometimes gets missed in all this conversation. It's like, yeah, we're going to be more profitable, but we want to reward our staff. We want to upskill them. We want to give them more opportunities for growth in the organization so that they feel like they have a succession plan that can grow and be rewarded for, the hard work that they put in.
Eric, it's been an amazing conversation. I love the narrative that you're ending with. It's based on optimism. Yes, there will be changes, but I think we're all going to, go towards a future where we sort of, as Microsoft said, that, walk away from the drudgery of work and focus on what matters for our customers, right? So thank you for being here. It's been a pleasure. I'd love to have you back.
Likewise, I look forward to it. Thanks, Sugata.
Thank you.